This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we are broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. There's an exhibition of photos opening Friday, January 24th at Tempest Projects in Ybor City, Tampa. The Lost Weekend, the photography of May Pang. May documented her life with John Lennon from 1973 through 1975. And I'd like to welcome May Pang to Tuesday Cafe. Welcome, May.
Thank you, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to talk specifically about your photos and about your exhibition throughout the interview, but let's set all of that up with some background information about you. Tell us about your life before you met John Lennon.
Wow. I had been working for him for like him and Yoko actually for 3 years prior to my relationship with him. And I worked in the office of Apple Records and APCO, which was the managing company of Apple in New York and in the US. And so I got a chance to work with a bunch of people and work in the music industry.
And one of the people that you were working with before you even worked with John and Yoko directly was Alan Klein. What kinds of things were you doing with Alan Klein, who was managing John Lennon?
Well, I was working for their publishing, doing more publishing than anything else. I mean, I was working around the place as a secretary, and in case they needed me at another spot, I would be there to fill in. But I mainly worked in music publishing, which was a treat for me because he had the greatest catalog, as I would say, and to learn from. I mean, you're talking about Cameo Parkway Records and Publishing, which was, of course, back in the day, that was a big company with all the Philly sound, Dee Dee Sharp, Bobby Rydell, and, Question Mark and the Mysterians. And then he also at that time was managing the Stones. So he also had immediate records and publishing. So I had the Stones publishing, and he had CAG's catalog, which was Sam Cooke. And that was another thrill. So besides Apple, he had all this other stuff. To me, that was a treasure trove of info and fun and going through the music. And that I was into.
And I'm going to flash forward a little bit to when you were a personal assistant for John and Yoko, and you went to England and you were at their estate when you first heard the song Imagine. So describe what was happening when you first heard that song and what it was like.
It was amazing to be standing there, and you hear records, you say, oh, I love the song, and you just move on. But to see them um, as he was performing it, in a sense, even though it was done to be filmed, and you have to give them credit. All the Beatles did something that was ahead of their time. You think about it, they were filming vignettes for each of their songs, individual songs on their album. So I was there when they did the whole Imagine album, but specifically for Imagine, I was there, and I remember him sitting at the piano, and I was there, and Yoko opening up the shutters in the big room, and I was helping her get dressed for each vignette they were doing, and different things. So it really affected me. You start seeing it, so it's not just so easy. It's everything is thought out. So it was great.
And by 1973, everyone was in New York. You and John and Yoko were in New York. But then John suggested leaving New York and going to LA, and he brought you, but this wasn't at the insistence of Yoko. Is that how history somehow gets it?
History is as I would always say. That's why I ended up doing the documentary, The Lost Weekend, a Love Story, only because I had to take back my narrative. It just got everybody else was doing my narrative, and they were saying whatever they wanted and what they thought was actually happening. But what actually happened was John was having a moment where he was with his lawyer, and who happened to live in LA. Harold Sider was getting ready, and he looked at John and he says, "Okay, we're done." And John said, "Well, when are you going back to LA?" And he said, "Tonight. I'm on a plane tonight, like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, whatever it was." And he goes, "Well," he looked at him and he goes, "Well, May and I will be joining you." And he went, "Oh, okay." And so there I was standing there going, we're leaving, we're going somewhere. And I had to get everything and arrange for, us to be on the same flight as Harold. And so, yes, it was John's suggestion. He just wanted to get out of Dodge, as I would say.
Our guest is May Pang. She has an exhibition of photos opening Friday, January 24th at Tempest Projects in Ybor City. It's called The Lost Weekend, the photography of May Pang. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from WMNF in Tampa. So once you got to LA, John was working on an album of cover songs, and the album was called Rock and Roll. It was being produced by Phil Spector. So tell us what those sessions were like.
Crazy. That's all I'm going to say. Was not, and I was not used to it because we had been doing other albums and stuff in New York, and so this was the first time. You're working with Phil Spector, perfect person for cover songs from back in the '60s. That John wanted to pay homage to all the people that represented his life. The songs he loved, and so perfect person. So we thought, until I realized that this man was carrying his guns. And John and I really thought that when he was carrying his guns, that they were not real, that they were filled with blanks. And he was just showing, I'm Phil Spector and here are my guns, and who would have thought in a million years that they were loaded? Until he shot it off one day when we happened to be in LA and we were listening to something. And I was in one room and John and Phil and Mal Evans, the original roadie for the Beatles, were in another room. And all of a sudden we heard this noise and everybody that was in the room that I was standing in, the control room, ducked. And I'm standing there going, what is that sound? Everybody else is ducking except me. And I'm standing next to, of all people, Phil's mother, who happened to come by the studio. And I went running towards the sound and I opened the door and there's Phil with the gun in his hand. And John has his finger in his ear because the pop was so loud it was affecting his eardrum. And he's saying, Phil, if you're going to shoot me, but don't mess with my ears, man. I got to listen. I got to use them. And Mal goes over to Phil and says, give me that. You shouldn't have this in your hand. And Phil's going, you can't tell me what to do. And I'm going, hey guys, come on, what's going on? Here's the youngest person. I am the youngest person in this group, but seem to be the oldest person in this group. And I'm going, what is going on? And Mal says, we're just horsing around and he was doing something. Phil was doing something that was hurting Mal. Mal just as he was back then, gentle giant, said, can you not do that? It really hurts, that you're hurting my nose and I could feel it. And Phil didn't take to it too well. And that's when he went and he drew the gun out and it went off. Well, lo and behold, everybody calmed down. We all went back to the recording. The next day, John and I are having a peaceful dinner, as so we thought. And I see Mal. I said, Mal's in the restaurant. He goes, Mal, And he comes running. He goes, oh, I've been looking for you two. And he said, what's going on? He goes, well, just wanted to show you the bullet from last night. And both John and I were like stunned. What bullet? That's how it was. What bullet are you talking about? He goes, there were real bullets? We were just so totally taken aback by that one.
And there was something that set John off around this time when you were recording Rock and Roll, when Phil Spector was there. Didn't John go off into a rage and even physically abuse you at some point around this time?
Now his story has gotten more out of hand than anything. He was it was there was let me put it this way. When we were in the recording session, the first thing I noticed was there were bottles of liquor. And I said to John, I've never seen this before. And obviously Phil had ordered all of this stuff. So everybody was drinking. And so what happened was John hanging out with the boys, and all the boys, and I say that, wanted to go party. Me being the only one not drinking, a lot of them didn't take too kindly to that one. Not Phil, not anybody. So John thought he was just one of the boys. And the abuse was really more like he just shoved me to the side, but it wasn't like he was really going at it. He didn't even realize. And I mean, John was so, he was just like, did I, what happened? He didn't even realize what had happened. So I, John was just wanting to be one of the guys. But what people fail to understand, he did not do this and say, oh, I'm going to go and continue on. And, it was instigated by so many of them, including Phil. I mean, he was a big instigator for those sessions that he would come in late. We'd be waiting and everybody was already getting drunk because all the liquor is sitting out there for the boys to enjoy. And I was not happy about it at all, and that's the that's what happened. And I said to John at one point, somebody's going to hurt somebody soon. And I was talking about people who were leaving drunk and driving. And that's what scared me. And it did happen. Somebody did have a crash.
And around this time, you decided to go back to New York. Why was that?
Well, that was later. I mean, all that started early, and then this came later. It was just like it was just a little too much, and it was time. I said, I gotta go. I can't deal with this, and my girlfriend was actually with me, and apparently John actually told her, he says, just take care of May, just just make sure she's okay. So, you know what? It obviously wasn't the last time I saw him, and everything straightened out. I went home, and next thing you know, I'm back out there. It was like not even not very long. It was like turnaround.
And if I'm not mistaken, the one of the reasons that you went back to LA once you were in New York is because Cynthia Lennon and Julian, John's son, first son, was they were
Their
about to
son, yeah,
visit John. Yeah, they were about
yeah.
to visit John. And who was it that suggested to you that you should go back out to LA and kind of help make that peaceful?
Well, it was actually John. There's a lot more to the story. I could only tell so much. There's a lot of things in there, and even when I wrote about it, I try to make it as simple as possible. It's never that easy. But it was John who didn't want who didn't even want me to leave. He said, and he turned around and he said to Yoko, I really rather have May come back, try and find her, and see where she is, and and whatever. And I didn't even want to go back. And I said to her, when she found out I was in New York, she says, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in New York." She goes, "Come right over." She had me, she goes, John can't be by himself. I said, "What are you talking about?" She says, "Gee, he's got to have somebody there, and you got to go back." And I said, "I don't think it's a good idea at first." And he goes, "No, no, you got to go. He can't be alone." And it was just, it was one of those moments. And I got back on a plane. It was like I was home more than 24 hours, and I was back on a plane. And I went out there, and he said, he said to me, he says, I knew I could get you back out here. I was trying to find a way. And and this is, I'm sorry you left, and sorry, it was all this other stuff that went on.
But the visit then with Cynthia, Julian, and John went well, and in part because of how how you kind of lubricated the whole thing.
Absolutely. Um, what an interesting word, lubricated. That's it for this. Yeah, you know what? He was so nervous because he hadn't seen Cynthia in years. Not since their divorce, I think. And he hadn't spoken to her or anything. And he hadn't seen Julian in 3 years because I was around when that was one of the last times they were together. And I will tell you that I told him, I said, I will make it easy and it'll be fine. And I gave them the opening to have that closure that they needed, and it worked, because after that it was much easier for them to communicate when he had to speak to Julian, which I made sure that he called every weekend.
Our guest is May Pang. She has an exhibition of photos opening Friday, January 24th at Tempest Projects in Ybor City, Tampa. It's called The Lost Weekend, the photography of May Pang. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from WMNF in Tampa. So back in LA, you were there when John was producing an LP with Harry Nielsen, and he wanted everyone to live together. So tell us about where everyone lived and who was there.
Well, to live together was a whole interesting thing because, John always thought, well, if we get everybody together, then, nobody will. One of the things that John took for serious was always the recording, and he loved for everybody to be and get there on time. So he thought instead of everybody wandering off, maybe we get everybody in, get everybody out there, and we'll be fine. Well, little did I know that Harry actually rented. See, Harry was the one who rented this place, and he told John, and it turned out to be the house that was built by Louis B. Mayer, of course, one of those movie moguls of the what was it, 1920s or whatever, and he built that, or and then, but it was once owned by the Kennedys, not Kennedys, sorry, Peter Lawford, who was the in-law to the Kennedys. And of course, this has the history of where Marilyn might have been there as well. Those are the rumors. And John was fascinated by it. And because I remember when we got into the house, I said, "Oh, we're on the beach. We're in Santa Monica." And he opens up the balcony. There's like a Juliet balcony. And he goes, "So this is where they did it." And the view was beautiful. Look out into the ocean. And I said, "Did what?" And he goes, "Marilyn, Marilyn." I said, "What?" And then I realized that here we are, this was the house. And then a few days later, after we moved in, there was a party that Peter Lawford was throwing. And we went to it, and I sat next to him, and I said, "Hey, Peter, I just want to tell you something." He goes, "What?" And I go, "We just moved into this house on Pacific Coast Highway." And I tell him, and he goes, and he had his cigarette in his between his fingers. And he took a puff and he blew it out, and he goes, and a smile came on his face, and he goes, "Some good times, some really good times." You can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is the things that happened. It was
And
amazing.
you were taking photographs this whole time, and that's part of what this exhibition is about. But the good times in the past isn't just what you're concerned about. There were musical rendezvous happening there at the beach when you were there, and when John Lennon was there. Who else came and during those recording sessions? Who else jammed?
Well, I think the first night is what we're all alluding to, and that was the first night of the session. And it was this guy named Paul McCartney with his lovely wife Linda, and it was at the end of the session. And I remember Paul walking through the doors, and I'm facing John, and he sort of read my mouth as I'm going, "Paul," and he goes, "Paul," and he turned and he saw him, and he went, "Oh, hey, hi," and it was nothing. No fanfare, no nothing. It just said hi. And he goes, "What? Are you finished?" And John said, "Yeah, but if you want to hang around, we've got other things going, we'll probably hang and do some music." He goes, "Yeah." And then of course Stevie Wonder shows up as well. And so that night, uh, we did a jam session, and both Mal Evans and myself ended up playing tambourines as Linda's on Hammond organ. What was it? Stevie Wonder on electric piano. But we didn't have a drummer. Now, for the session, we actually had three drummers. We had Ringo, we had Jim Keltner, and we had Keith Moon. But they all left after the session ended, so we didn't have a drummer. So the bass player in the group decides to be the drummer. Now we don't have a bass player. So to this day, I don't know who joined us on that one.
Our guest is May Pang. She has an exhibition of photos opening Friday, January 24th at Tempest Projects in Ybor City. It's called The Lost Weekend, the photography of May Pang. And we're talking about the experiences and the photography during that lost weekend with John Lennon. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from WMNF in Tampa. So you and John eventually went back to New York and he got sober. Is that right?
Well, you know what? He was never drinking as everybody. The couple of times that we were hanging out in LA, he was not drinking all the time. It just happens that when you go out and there's a lot of things going on, you hang out with your buddies. The person that gets noticed is the person that's going to make the best copy. And even though Harry Nielsen started the night out, no one's going to care about Harry Nielsen in the copy as much as they would like to see John Lennon. So that's what ended up happening. But we were not out every night drinking. And so it was one of those things.
Around that time is when John was recording the Walls and Bridges LP. One of the songs on that is Number Nine Dream. You were a background vocalist on that song.
Yeah, I had no idea I was going to be the background vocalist or the vocalist to that little segment. Because all of a sudden I'm in the other room working on some accounts and things, and I hear the assistant coming running to me saying, "Oh, we need you immediately. John needs you." I said, "For what?" And I go running in and I see the room is dark in the studio, lights on the microphones hanging, and then all of a sudden it was like I look at John, I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Get out there." And I said, "Get out where?" And I see this and I go, "Why am I going out there?" He goes, "I need you out there. Just go out." And him and the his engineer, Roy Sakala, were just laughing. I said, "What is going on?" He goes, "Go out there. I need you." And that's how it started for me to end up doing the whispering on of John's name out there on Number Nine Dream.
Another song that was on that LP is Whatever Gets You Through the Night. So, what's the connection with Elton John there, and what's the significance of that song for John Lennon?
Well, I think that night, we were working on the remix and overdubs and we found out that Elton was in town. He wanted to come by and visit, and he said, "What can I'd love to come by." And John said, "Sure." And what he was working on, he said to Elton, "I'm working on this." And he goes, "I'm thinking of something." He goes, "Well," Elton says, "Hang on, let me hear it." And then he goes, "All right, I got an idea." And that was all. And he went by the piano and he goes, and started putting down the track for it. And it was great. All he had to do was hear it once and he was gone. He was doing it.
And Elton knew it was a number one hit.
Well, you know what? When it came to picking the song, there was a couple of songs that Capitol wanted, and one of them happened to be "Whatever Gets You Through the Night." And and a few of us thought, "Oh, that could be a hit." He goes, then Johns goes, "I'm not sure." And so, and he was mentioning it to them, and he said, "Listen," he goes, "if it becomes a hit and becomes number one, then you'll have to get on stage with me." And John said, "Oh, sure, I'll do it." And the only reason he accepted that was because he didn't think it was going to become number one. And John had never had a number one at that point. So, and when it happened, um, it was like, "Oh my God." And Elton, being gracious, said, "Listen, you don't have to get up on stage if you don't want to." And John said, "No, a bet is a bet, and I'm gonna honor it."
And that turned out to be the Madison Square Garden concert where Elton John was performing and John Lennon came up and did that song. I don't know if you want to add anything more about the personal side of things that happened that night or that started from that night.
Well, there was nothing more than that. Everybody kept wanting to know what happened. I mean, we only had one rehearsal. John and I flew up with Elton on his private plane to Boston to see him perform just so he could understand the show. And I think if you're alluding to is the fact that yes, Yoko came to the show, but I was the one who told her that that John was going to be there to perform. And she said, "Oh my God, I want to go, I want to go." And tickets were arranged by Tony King, who worked for Apple at the time and who was a good friend of Elton's. And we said, "Make sure she gets her ticket." So she goes, "Absolutely." And so that was it. They saw each other backstage. We knew she was going to be there, and that was it. Then we all went to the after party, and John and I went home, and then we had things to do because we knew that unbeknown, with the storyline that's going on, people forget. George Harrison came to town. We went to see George, and and what was it? Julian was coming back for his Christmas holiday, so we went to Florida, and then of course the signing of the breakup of the Beatles. That all still happened after the Elton John concert. So let's put the myth down that that was a myth. They did not get back together. That was all a myth.
Yeah, and speaking of Julian's trip to Walt Disney World in Orlando, you were there, and the breakup of the Beatles. John had missed the signing in, I think it was in New York. Everyone was wondering where
Yes,
John
that was
was.
during that time. Yes.
Yeah, but then those documents were signed when all of you were in Orlando at Walt Disney World, and you documented that with your camera.
Yeah, what happened was John didn't sign it on the date they had. It was the day before George's last date of his concert, and there was still something that was irking John because he would have been involved with taxes for the breakup, and he didn't want to be the only one. Let's put it that way, because he was the only one that was living in America. There was 35 to 40 people in the room at each time they had a meeting. So to get everything done, and he finally expressed his concern. He goes, I just don't want to be the only one to be responsible for this. So and he didn't want to come in, and he told the lawyer, his own lawyer had no idea. And I got on the phone. I said, Harold, he's not coming. And I told him the reason. So he said, okay. And he just went in and he said, the stars aren't right, just for that. And so it never he didn't appear. But a couple of days later, it was all worked out. But by that point, we were now getting ready we're down in Florida. So they had to bring down all the paperwork. Everything was done, and the paperwork was brought down to the Polynesian Resort Hotel in Disney World for John to sign. And everybody to this day has been looking for that room. And the room that I was told that, oh, they think they had it. I said, you got to be kidding. We'll never be on the ground floor. So that was it. And they're still looking for it. And besides, I know that the place had been renovated. So definitely not there.
Well, that's one of your famous photos when you took a photo of John signing the breakup documents for the Beatles at Walt Disney World. But another photo that you took is of Julian Lennon that he's using as the cover of his latest album called Jude. What are
Right.
what are some of the other types of photos that people might see when they go to this exhibition?
Well, not only did I get Julian's cover, which was great, but I had the father doing the on the 45 sleeve for the UK when they released Imagine, and he himself picked out, each of them picked out their photos. He wanted that photo for the sleeve, and I only found out most recently that 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 release was also for Imagine on the UK was done on my birthday back in 1975. So I was even thrilled about that.
Well, is there anything else that people should know about your story or about your photographic arts before I let you go, May?
Well, you know what? When they come out to Tampa, I will be there. Every as whatever the hours are, I will be there. And it will be, they can come and talk to me, and they can now see the photos of John the way I saw him, the way I didn't take it all the time because I felt, it had to be special the way there were times when I looked at it and said, oh, this is a great shot. But this was only for us. So to me, this was it's I'm glad I can share it with other people so they can see what he looked like really during our time together. And I also found out that the gallery it's a nonprofit place too. So, please come in and hopefully you'll pick up a piece and take John home, as I would say. I can now share him with everyone.
Well, I want to thank you very much for coming on Tuesday Cafe, May.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
May Pang is exhibiting her photos opening Friday, January 24th at Tempest Projects in Ybor City. The exhibition is called The Lost Weekend, The Photography of May Pang. It runs through Sunday, January 26th. Tempest Projects is at 1624 East 7th Avenue on the second floor in Tampa's Ybor City. You can also see her photo exhibition at the Ocean Art Gallery in Ormond Beach on Tuesday, January 21st and the 22nd. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa.